The jump boot is one of the coolest and most iconic military boots in history, and there's tons of versions out there available on the market. And last year we cut apart one of the more popular ones in the Corcoran jump boot that Carolina makes for about 245 bucks, and it turned out it was pretty subpar and mostly just a cosplay style boot without real substance and reliability. So now I'm on the pursuit to find a decent quality jump boot. So this time we're cutting apart Rocky's version to see if I can find a modern version of this iconic boot that you can actually wear, depend on, and rely on. And thanks to Rocky for sending us this boot and sponsoring this video. So what is the information on this boot? Well, the brand is Rocky. The style is the lace-up jump boot. They weigh 1 pound, 15 ounces. They retail for a little bit cheaper than the Corcorans at $204. They're made in the Dominican Republic, and the way that Rocky positions this product, this 10-inch boot is a Rocky classic, now built with a speed lacing system with NATO hooks. The upper has been built from premium full-grain black leather. Keep your boots in tip-top shape with a polishable toe. The Goodyear welt construction gives these boots a longer life with the ability to be repaired with no trouble and revert to the original hardiness. And if you want a pair of these, check them out via the links in my description. And so now let's start looking at this boot, starting with the leather first, because this is one where there's two types of leather on this boot. Both of them have a pretty heavy finish on top that's either a polyurethane, a plastic, or a rubberized layer, because it doesn't seem like it's just a pigment. This more matte leather might be a pigment, but we put the lighter to it. It looked like there's definitely some synthetic materials in there. But the more interesting leather is the toe cap, the backstay, and the external heel counter cover that are this really, really almost mirror finish leather. But where this is this military style boot, and they have that need on occasion to have a really polishable heel and toe for stuff that I don't understand about the military. Something about boot camp and polishing boots is about as much as I know. That's what this is intended for. But that doesn't mean that it's good quality leather hiding underneath. So we burned this shiny leather as well to see how it reacted, and it melted and bubbled even more than this leather. So it's clearly some sort of synthetic top coat on top. But once it was burned, we cut a little cross section out of it to see how good the actual cross section of the leather is, how high it sits in that general cross section. Obviously the higher the better and the more durable, the lower the cheaper and less durable. Well, both of the leathers pretty clearly have plenty of the grain in there. The thickness is pretty decent as well. The shiny leather is a little bit thinner at 1.8 millimeters, where the rest of the leather that's the more integral and more important leather is 2.3 millimeters, which is a good hardy thickness of leather. And as for the quality of the leather, you know, it's far from a really dry leather, but it's not nearly as saturated as some of the other like high quality Horween style leathers. And part of that is you can't have a really oily leather and put a heavy top coat on top, because of that oil is going to prevent that plastic coating from bonding to it. And so that's why it's kind of in the middle grade. So all that being said, how good is this leather? Well, I hate top coats. I think they're just the worst thing you can do to leather, because after a little bit of wear, that top coat separates, starts flaking off, and they look terrible. Versus a higher quality leather that it doesn't have a top coat, there's nothing to wear off. But given that this is this military style of boot and you need that polished toe and heel, and the quality of leather underneath is not terrible, it's not ideal, but it's not terrible. So for me, when it comes to durability, it's probably gonna be fine, but how it's gonna look over time, that's where you're gonna run into some potential troubles if you're wanting to keep it this like pristine, black, all the way through look. What about the inside of this boot? Well, like traditional heritage and jump boot style boots, it's unlined in the shaft of the boot, but it does have a lining in the vamp. It's just a typical lining. It's nothing special. It's not leather. It's just some synthetic fabric that's pretty typical for this $200 price range. It does have a dedicated counter cover, which I really like, especially for this price range. Again, it's not leather. It's more of a felted material that when we put the flame to it, it melted, and it's clearly synthetic, but it's still going to perform better than just a fabric lining as the heel counter. And unlike the traditional way of making a jump boot, this does come with a big old thick insole. This thing at the heel is ridiculous how thick it is. You'll see when we get it cut in half. Then underneath, you can see that it is a fiberboard, and it's a Texon fiberboard, which is a higher quality name brand compared to some of the cheaper sub $200 boots that use a really cheap, thin, and a lot looser fiber structure fiberboard. This is at least the name brand that's known, that has a reputation of quality. So similar story with the inside of the boot. You know, like it's not true to the heritage, it's more true to the current times and how boots are made in this $200 price range. That seems to be echoed through the sole of the boot, because you have a more modern version. It's basically Rocky's version of the Vibram V100, very similar lug pattern, similar densities, similar thicknesses. It also has that rubber slip sole, which is more of a modern style of doing things. But one thing that is very old school is how this boot is is built and how it's constructed, because like they said in the description, it's a 360 Goodyear welt. So instead of just being glued together like modern boots or injection molded, it does maintain that heritage way of sewing the boot together, attaching the bottom of the boot and the upper of the boot through that welt stitch that runs all the way around the boot here. So everything from the outside tells me that this is a modernized version of the jump boot made to sit at that $200 price range, while still using the traditional construction techniques, but the materials have been swapped out for more affordable synthetics like the luggy outsole, the rubber midsole instead of leather, the synthetic lining instead of a cotton or leather lining, the fiberboard lasting board instead of leather, the highly finished leather instead of a regular leather that you have to make it a highly finished leather. So let's cut this in half and see what materials they use on the inside, see if it's worth the price, see if this would be a decent boot if you remove the jump boot aspect of it. Is this more than a cosplay jump boot that you can actually rely on, or is it more similar to the other jump boot we cut in half that's just kind of a cosplay boot? All right, we got them cut in half, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing, because that one little push is the most impactful thing you can do for the business that's literally just free and takes like a fraction of a second to click a mouse. And those of you that are subscribed, thank you for subscribing, because that's what allows us to cut apart 2 brand new pairs of boots and shoes every single week. So let's see what's inside. So what's on the inside of this boot? Well, it looks like it's built like most Goodyear welt boots in this price range, made in a foreign country, with the foam filling underneath of the that fills the void caused by the Goodyear welt. It also has a fiberglass shank, and now we can tell for sure that it's a true Goodyear welt and that the welt is synthetic instead of a leather welt. So is this a good boot regardless of the jump boot aspect of it? I think it's on par with boots in the market. You know, there's some boots at $200 that are the higher value, with a lot more leather materials throughout the construction, and there's plenty of boots at this price range that are a lower value. To me, this boot sits right in the middle of the pack. You know, I think it's a good value. It's not a great value, but it's not a terrible value. It's right on par with the industry for a $200 boot. Is this boot better than the previous jump boot? Yeah, it's significantly better. This is actually a boot that you could use and rely on. You take away that jump boot aspect, and it just looks like a regular boot for this price range, versus the other jump boot was just like layers of loose foam, and it was just clearly made to look like a jump boot, but not made to be durable. This one is actually durable for that price range. Obviously, if you're gonna spend 500 bucks, you'd have a lot different materials, be a lot more durable. This is a $200 boot. So what is this boot for? Well, because it is built like a decent quality boot and it uses all the right materials for the price range, this boot could be used in a lot of different ways. It could be used as a tactical boot, it could be used as a hiking boot, it could be used as a work boot. You could use it like literally if you want the cosplay aspects, it kind of looks like the traditional one. And this style of boot seems to be where Rocky really shines, by finding that sweet spot where they can drop the price because they use cheaper materials, more affordable components, and while still maintaining the right techniques and high enough quality materials that obviously the more money you spend, it's gonna be more valuable. But anything lower than this, you're gonna end up with like the loose cemented boots or cheaper materials. This has basically what I'm getting at, the bare minimum you need to have it be a reliable, traditionally built boot with modern materials, if that made sense. But at the end of the day, it still is not as close to the jump boot as I would like if I was buying it for a replica. So the hunt continues for a better and a true version of the jump boot. So if you guys have any recommendations of where I can find a more true to the original version, let me know. Let me know your experiences in these boots. And thank you guys for everything you do in supporting our handmade leather goods we make here in the shop and the channels and all the stuff that we do. It's only made possible because of your guys' support, and 2023 was a big year for this business, and all of your guys' support made it everything possible and all the cool stuff we're gonna be able to do in 2024. So thank you guys. See ya.